Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to ManifestED. My name is John Farrar, and thrilled to be back with you today. Joining me is one of our co-hosts, Abby Frost.
Hello.
And together, we will, hey, Abby, good to see you. I'm thrilled about today. We've got one of my favorite people to talk to about how this space is evolving at such rapid velocity. And I don't think there's anybody who does a better job of demystifying what has quickly become a complex ecosystem with the global lens of Patrick Brothers. Patrick is the founder and CEO of HolonIQ. If you're in this space, my bet is you've already heard about him, maybe seen him speak. I know I have become a student, I guess, of the sessions that he puts together across social media, across YouTube. I'm always paying attention to what he's got going on. I feel like we get better for it. So he's one of my favorite people to talk to about this, and he is nice enough to be joining us all the way from Sydney today, 6:30 in the morning, local time. We are thrilled to have Patrick join us.
Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Abby. Hey, John. So great to be here. So kind.
We're so excited to have you join us. I mean, John said this perfectly, but when I joined Google on the education team, I went straight to HolonIQ. That's how I got up to speed on everything. HolonIQ has just been like my go-to resource. So I've been so excited to have this conversation and swap our POVs on the industry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can't wait.
One of these days, I can't wait, Patrick, till we get back in person and we can debate the future of education over a cocktail.
You bet.
And join you in Sydney, yes.
Yeah, Sydney would be a great place. We'll probably go into the wee hours of the morning, if you will. I believe a lot of people watching this probably know who you are, but for the betterment of the audience, tell us a little bit about how you founded HolonIQ, what the story's been like up until now, and maybe specifically what y'all have been up to in the last 12 months as COVID has kind of pressed you into the spotlight, I think.
Absolutely, John. Love to. So HolonIQ, we're only 3 years old. I started HolonIQ with my co-CEO, Maria Spies. Maria spent her entire career in education, most of that in higher education. I've spent time in a bunch of different public-private sectors. And to cut a long story short, we just saw this enormous and magnificent global industry really lacking the support that we thought it needed to make decisions that matter about the future of education. And it was pre-COVID. To cut a long story short, we've built a global intelligence platform. We serve governments, institutions, firms, and investors around the world who we feel are making really important decisions that matter. And it's just, I mean, you know what it's like when you're doing something you love. It's kind of, it's easy and it's fun. And we've done that. I think COVID has really upped the stakes for everybody. You know, we were on a path to transformation. We were still kind of 50-50 about, you know, how much change we were likely to see. But it's a whole new ball game now. It's a whole new landscape, which has some amazing things about it and some really challenging things about it as well. So that's HolonIQ in a quick wrap, and pleasure to be here today and can't wait to get stuck in.
I mean, Patrick, I think you said it perfectly, just how much change we've seen accelerated because of COVID. Our research is indicating the same. I think like the money stat that John and I always keep going back to is pre-COVID, roughly 30% of students were enrolled in some form of online, and now we're seeing 80% want to continue with at least some form. It's just crazy in just a year.
Absolutely.
So let's start there, Patrick. I guess, what is your belief on, we hear the term all the time, and I've recited it several times. We believe we pulled what was an inevitable online education trend, pulled it forward, 7 years, 10 years, and we're steeped in the stats here, but do you think that's true? And if it is, what does it portend for the larger landscape?
Yeah. Look, absolutely. The first piece that we did as HolonIQ was called Education in 2030, and it was 5 scenarios for the future of education. One of those scenarios was called Education as Usual, as in not much changes. And it's the most fascinating baseline for us, because and we must have surveyed in person, way back when that was a thing. We must have surveyed like 5,000 plus executives from universities, from schools, investors around the world, again, in person. And what they told us was 95% did not want education as usual as the scenario that played out. But 50% thought it probably was going to be the scenario.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It was kind of this like, oh my goodness. How do we move the needle here? But today, and I can't wait to, build some new scenarios and baseline as well. But it's kind of really nobody you talk to who thinks education is going to be as usual, if you like. The question is, what is it going to be? How will it evolve? And I don't think, for the most part, that folks want it to be radically different. They just want it to be better and cheaper and, a better return on investment for, for us, as people, as families, as mums, as dads, as young adults. So yeah, big change on the horizon. What and where and how remains to be seen.
I think you hit it. The survey data that you just recited is super interesting and reminds me of something that my psychologist father says all the time, which is nobody changes in the face of a comfortable situation. Now, in fairness to students, I think they've been uncomfortable and probably unsatisfied with the ROI on investment outcome, or at least an outcome that was still mostly in their hands. There wasn't direct line of sight, but the system itself, the infrastructure probably was pretty comfortable. COVID has now made everybody equally uncomfortable, and that's probably going to lead to the change that many of the people in your survey said they wanted, but kind of realized maybe the inertia was headed in the other direction, and that change wasn't coming. One of the things, let's dig into it. I want to get your take on things, but probably chief among the topics that I see you addressing, which I think was really fascinating because you do it with a global lens, right? And I think a lot of our audience is US based, but I think your global lens is value here. Micro credentials, right?
Yeah.
I think you're seeing how this is being adopted across all geographies, and then how it's retrofitted maybe those geographies' historic and traditional forms of higher ed. But I would love to get your take on micro credentials in general, and I guess I'll just lead with is the traditional degree dead? And if not, why not? Or if so, why so?
Yeah. What a hot topic. Like micro credentials. If there was a word that's being, repeated over and over and over on campus at the moment, in, all of the tech companies, supporting post-secondary education, but it's not just post-secondary, it would be micro creds. Is the degree dead? No way is a degree dead. And to kind of tip that upside down, the degree is kind of the ultimate bundle of micro credentials as it is. Degrees are so carefully built. When you get stuck inside how a degree is built, it's kind of down to the hour. 1 hour prep for this component of skills, 1 hour delivery, 30 minutes follow-up review. And, the funny thing is when you put a micro creds lens over the top of degrees, they're kind of this ultimate bundle of micro credentials. But the challenge is at the moment, they only come as a bundle. Yeah. They only come as a really expensive thing that takes a long time. And, RPL and credit recognition sucks in most markets, in the US for sure. And, we need to change that. And we need to break these down. We've talked forever about 21st century skills, and we've kind of failed to build some 21st century skill blocks to upskill us. And COVID's put a fire underneath, because we really need this to recover economically everywhere in the world. Every government in the world is turning to its higher education sector saying, cheaper, faster, smaller, better, go. Here's some funding. Because you know what, we can't wait for 4 years to turn around some folks who have got some skills to get this recovery underway. So yeah, hot topic. Degrees are not dead, absolutely. But, you know, microcreds are coming fast. Going to be interesting.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. What's interesting in some of the research that we've seen is that more and more students are turning to non-degree alternative pathways for their education because they see a more straightforward ROI to their investment in education. But we're also seeing that the first place that they go to figure out what are those options for me is with the university. So there's a right to play, there's a right to win there, but it's just who is going to be there first. Are you seeing a lot of these institutions globally, but in the US, actually building their credentialing strategy and trying to get there first?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, back to some numbers, we've got an amazing global higher education network, but when you zone in on our US executives as part of that, it was something like 85% believed that microcreds were a very important part of the institution's future, but it was kind of something like 10% who had kind
it's
of
crazy
in microcreds. But it's absolutely, if you go to the next, you know, Senate meeting or board or council or whatever, you better bet that microcreds is kind of on the agenda there coming through. Is like, what are we going to do about this thing? Where do we start? How fast do we go? What does this mean for our core? And all those questions. So yeah.
So a fascinating part, and I'm glad to hear you say that the degrees aren't dead. And I like what you, because I'm just a huge fan of higher education in general. So I think we want to see that persist. And it does seem like, and you and I have talked about this before, the infrastructure is there. It's not like the infrastructure needs to be turned down, but maybe it needs to be repurposed.
Yeah.
And my next question is like, are we at a point, and it sounds like maybe we're getting there, but I would love your take on it, where we can start to build this bridge that says like, okay, I'm going to go to higher ed institution X. While I'm there, I am going to take a class from whatever, Azure on cloud architecture, and e-commerce from Amazon, and whatever, digital marketing from Google, social marketing from Facebook, and then build curriculums around that. So there is cleaner line of sight to what Abby is saying, like, I'm going to invest this amount. I should be able to, with this kind of job targeted, that provides this kind of salary. And all these things are available to us. It just seems like we should be able to build that bridge now. Do you think that's coming? And are there either parts of your travels, virtual travels, I guess, over the last 12 months that you feel like, yeah, somebody's got a beat on this? I'm expecting, this part of the world or these programs come together to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think that it reminds me of this concept of a kind of a leapfrog strategy, right? John, you make an awesome point. We've got the infrastructure. We've got this incredible, in the US specifically, this incredible network of higher education institutions which have localization, but together have kind of globalization and kind of national connectivity as well. And in other markets, let's say like Southeast Asia, really fast growing dynamic market, very youthful market as well, very determined from an economic perspective to build growth. And so those folks don't have all that incredible infrastructure. They have some amazing institutions. And so they've got this interesting question is like, look, if we don't have the infrastructure, what could we do differently? Like maybe we don't follow the same linear path that some of our peers around the world followed. How can mobile play a role more meaningfully here? There's massive mobile distribution and adoption, and how do we make that a part? How do we build some of these programs from the bottom up so that they are cheap, light, fast, credible, industry linked, stackable, all the catchwords, right? And do that meaningfully, not just in a catchword kind of way. I think in the US, we see the full spectrum. We see some folks who are sitting back you can't unbundle this thing. You don't get it. Like it's a concentrated kind of period of study. It's about developing well-rounded citizens. You don't get it. Please don't unbundle it. We haven't discussed the unintended consequences. And kind of at the other end, you've got folks who are saying, oh my goodness, I get it. Wow. Like we need to get with the program. We need to build really industry facing curriculum and programs and, career linkages and rethink this whole thing. What about 1 year full time? We've heard so much discussion about 2-year institutions and their increasing relevance. Is it 1 year, 2 year full time as I come out of secondary and then I go out to work, and then I top up with some microcredits and I keep topping up because it's as if I need to stop learning, and so
Yeah.
I think it's just how, like you said, John, how do we re-roll the infrastructure that we have? But it's a different mindset, and there's some tricky things. Like you can't have microcredits that you can only enroll in once a year, for the academic calendar, and you do have to really re-architecture, and that takes money, that takes time, but that's the kind of challenge in front of us.
What do you, and maybe you just answered this question. The biggest barriers to that change is the existing infrastructure. So despite me saying it's an asset, it also is a detriment.
I don't think it's the infrastructure. I think it's a mindset, and I think it's fear. I think, and some of it's like really well placed. If you're to go into the abstract, like if you're an organization and your survival, you believe, exists by supporting people with 2 to 4 year programs, and someone saying to you, you need to break it all up down into little parts. Like you used to be a record store and someone's telling you to build Spotify. You're like, whoa, hold on a second. Like, hold on a second. And so, yeah, I think that, I think it's mindsets, and I'm not underestimating the infrastructure challenge because digital infrastructure is way behind in education. Like we're well progressed, but we're way behind other folks. And so what I'm not saying is it's easy, right? But I think that the main block is mindsets, and that goes from government about how we think about funding,
Totally.
education, regulators about how we think about what quality is, the endless loop of conference conversations about completion rates, down to institutions and ourselves. Like we're blocking it. All of, everyone, prancing around with a big fancy credential saying, I went to institution X, like I'm pretty impressive, and, we block it ourselves, right? When you're hiring, I approved a position description for someone the other day and I nearly fell over. There's a drop down there that says like education level. It's like,
Yeah.
what? Like, as if any of us believe one of those drop downs is correlated to an amazing person I might find out there to join our team, but we still do it. So plenty of blocks.
It's so true. I mean, it's where does it really start? Where's going to be the biggest cultural place to start? Is it with funding so that you open up more access?
Yeah.
Is it even just flipping the model and saying we're going to start but within the K through 12 space so people can even graduate high school and go straight into a high paying, high demand job? Like, is it with the instructional design and just thinking about the within the registrar's office of how you award credit, what that really means? You're right, Patrick, that there's so many different fronts and it's hard to determine the most impactful place to really start.
So Abby took us there, so I'm going to take that.
Okay.
the K-12 part of this discussion.
Yeah.
Right? And Patrick, you and I were talking about this earlier before we got on here, but like these micro-credentials, these certificates that are coming out from a number of employers, what are your thoughts on certainly probably high school age kids using some of that time to get certified in some of those places? Yeah. In my head, it's like, well, that just opens up two pathways. If you want to start working right away, you've got the right credentials to do that. Yeah. If you want to go to higher ed, that's fine. You've still got these credentials that might make better use of your higher ed experience and or just give you the options to start and stop that on your own accord.
I think it is a wonderful idea. I really do. And I've spoken to lots of superintendents and school principals and, you know, government leaders, school systems, and there are folks who are moving on this now too. There's different angles, you know, there's there's people out there, and I think it's amazing of them who are saying, look, you're underestimating our kids. Like they've got so much potential. Like they're so much smarter than we were. I know that from watching my kids. You know, one. And I think, you know, and the second part is like, let's challenge them. They want to be challenged. And so why not? How amazing would it be if you graduated secondary school with credentials that employers valued and used as hiring signals, and boom, you started a role. I think that there are actually already countries around the world who have started to build their vocational system linked to secondary education, where you can do part of a vocational program or a little snippet down in secondary school. But we've seen some amazing examples around the world. There's now, because the technology world, I think, in part is one of the leaders of, you know, credentialing, because all the employers are saying, look, how do I know when someone knows how to use this Google Cloud thing or this kind of digital architecture? And so we've seen kids now by themselves under their own steam kind of saying, guess what? I'm a Google Cloud practitioner. It's like, wow, that is cool. Like, imagine if we baked that in and got a head start. And that's a great example of kind of really thinking really differently about how we upskill, you know, our kids and adults on the way through. Not thinking about, you know, how much more funding do we need to give to K-12 and, you know, what curriculum alignment and micro-credentials. That represents really breakthrough thinking about ways that we could unleash the potential of all of us on the economy.
I love that you brought that up, Patrick, because I think it gets to the heart of one of the debates in the US, at least. Like, for education, are you training someone for life, or are you training them for a job? And I think that historically in the US, we've designed more around training someone for life. But in other markets, Germany, many are more so on the philosophy of training someone for a particular job. And that starts very early on in an education. I was just curious for your perspective too, with more of the focus being on skills right now. Do you think there's a philosophy shift or kind of like at a pivotal change within the US market, or what's your perspective there?
Yeah, I think it's hard for folks like us who are kind of trying to hang out on the leading edge and you know, looking over the horizon and thinking about most folks who are grappling with kind of the real world of today. But it makes me reflect on what we don't want to lose is like the emotion that you get when you see someone's graduation photo, right? Or what we don't want to lose is the concept we built around like first generation in your family of like getting a degree. You know, the UK used to have a metric around aspiring to 50% participation in degrees. And then, so I think that's something super special, like about inspiring all of us to achieve more and to learn more. And then at the flip side, and maybe it's not at the flip side, to be fair, is this conversation around, you know, intense about labor productivity and skills and the like. And I think what I want to make sure isn't lost in the conversation is it's not either or. Like, how do we build a system that has that amazing emotion you get when you see a graduation photo, cap and gown? You're like, whoa, that's big. That's a big moment for that person and that family. But build it into this kind of highly relevant skills thing, so that when you see a cap and gown photo, there isn't a cynic saying, yeah, but how much debt, and I hope they get a job or whatever. There's, you know, you see a graduation photo, go, that person's amazing. Like they've got it. Like, because to get to that point, imagine the skills that they have now. Imagine what they can do. And same again as an employer. I want to see those photos and not just feel nostalgic about what it means for that person, but think talent. Like, wow, imagine if they were on my team. Like, how good would that be? And trying to flip it, but not driving the rhetoric which some I don't know who attempted to do is, it's not like, we're not saying we should lose all those amazing skills that you get through, I don't know what it's, we still can't unpack it, of like being with a cohort in school or higher ed. Like, there's some magic there we haven't codified, and we don't want to lose that. What we want to do is make it cheaper,
Yes.
get better skills that employers want, and build this, you know, we've said it a gazillion times, lifelong learning, but just want to keep learning. So yeah,
and that's where I feel like we can't. I'm glad you said it. I feel like with the existing infrastructure allows us to have both. That's where this curriculum bridge just needs to be built, because you know, again, Abby's data will tell us that, as she said earlier, the number one place students want to go to for skills training is universities today. Now that could change if we don't deliver the product we need to, but today
Yeah.
it's going to go first, and then so as a result, it lends itself to saying, like, we can have both here. We can educate generally and provide skills that, you know, the market needs from our students. Like, that's all there for us right now, and I believe we can help make it happen.
absolutely.
But it is interesting. We get a chance to talk to leaders, and some are completely there, and how do I push my institution? And others are kind of like, yeah, once this all goes away, it'll probably go back to the way it was.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think it really, you know, the back to normal, it really just depends on who you are trying to either bring onto campus or to your online courses, because we know the minority is becoming the majority in the US. The demographics are shifting pretty dramatically. So again, like if you're watching those, it's so important to think about, how am I bringing in that adult working professional, working learner? How am I making sure that we're bringing in more access and affordability so students of color can afford and get that degree and get that high paying job? Women, I mean, there are a lot of, I think the broader audience that these schools have to be paying attention to and delivering for is shifting so quickly.
I know. Another kind of either or that just kills me is this online education thing. Like, you know, it's not as good, and, you know, now we know, and da 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 da. I mean, when you see people in context, like I've seen incredible, you know, online learning. I mean, it's not even a thing anymore. It's just learning. for like school superintendents and principals, right? Leadership is lonely, and for them especially, right? They're in their context. They are, you know, they're getting hammered, and online, you know, programs for them allow them to connect with other people in the same context, you know, all around the world, and develop a cohort. That's part of that magic dust we can't codify.
Yeah.
And, you know, move through professional development, just like you said, Abby, like, you know, a single mom who's raising a whole bunch of kids and has a career and is trying to transition or upskill. Like, you know, what an amazing opportunity, you know, to engage and to upskill and to build credentials and to, you know, build a better future for her and her family. And, you know, we just can't do that in the physical infrastructure side. So it's not either or. Should everyone start doing online university? No one's saying that. No one's saying that. What we're saying is, imagine the increased participation we could drive. Yes. You know, at an adult level. Imagine you know, if you said to, you know, the Biden administration, you know, we want 10 times the economic productivity and upskilling of the US. Would you like that? Go, yeah, absolutely. Let's do that. And so if we frame the question more about participation and upskilling, I think and if we focus on the learner, it's kind of hard to go wrong if you're fighting for the learner. Then I think we'll be, you know, in a really good place. But like I said before, like, it's not a slam dunk. It's really hard. It costs a lot of money, and it does take time. So
no, I think I couldn't agree more. That's such a good point. And I guess even just on the infrastructure point there, it's so different in the US versus other exploding markets in education like India, China. What are some of the big innovative ways that you're seeing delivery happen, I guess, particularly from like an ed tech perspective in those markets?
Yeah. Yeah, huge. Wow, those markets are they're big. I mean, we all know that.
Yeah.
But they're moving fast too. I think some of it I put down to is just if you don't have the infrastructure that the US has, but you have kind of 3 to 5 times the population,
Mm-hmm.
and you're on a rocket ship in terms of economic growth, it's kind of a must do. It's not like in some
Yeah.
respects, but in others, I think it's driving. There's so many more people in those economies who are thinking, goodness, how are we going to do this? Like, we're going to need some supports, and we're going to need other things. And that's why you're seeing a lot more kind of peer-to-peer support. The funny thing is, we're all kind of teachers in the skills that we've built over time. And so there's actually this incredible network of mentors and coaches, and technology can help connect us. Technology can help us consume. I mean, I'm constantly trying to learn a language. Just want to be nice for me to
Just one.
and so technology is helping me kind of embark on that kind of lifelong mission of being multilingual, and that wouldn't happen without technology. Supporting school about career transition, the pathway to work, even just helping schools and universities from a productivity perspective, with school management systems and the like. It's a big deal to run organizations with, children and young adults and older adults as well. Like they're full on big organization corporations. They just haven't had the digital transformation that most others have enjoyed over the last 10 years.
I think it's a good point, and the opportunity that's in front of us now is to almost liberate the best forms of education across the globe. That's the other part of what technology can do. Tori Patterson, who leads up Owl Ventures, that a lot of our viewers will be familiar with. I mean, they've deployed. They're a venture capital firm that takes pride in leading funding for breakthrough ed tech firms. Dispensed hundreds of millions in the last couple of years, and a lot of it globally, because I think there is a lean in specifically in APAC on innovating and getting to people at scale in new ways. It's been fascinating to watch that, and that's again, all these geographies are operating differently, but increasingly should be learning from each other.
Absolutely.
Technology bridging the communication.
Absolutely. Look, I think in 2019, no word of a lie, I would have landed in 20 countries in 2019. And in every one of those markets, the speech starts with, "You don't get it, we're different." And then the speech continues with, "We have the same problems as the guys over."
Yeah.
And so everyone's got a different context, there's no doubt about it, like a different funding environment, a different regulatory environment, different social norms. Like, everyone's got bits of those, but we're kind of more similar than we are different. And I think it is really cool to see players like Al, who are supporting innovation in other markets, learning about what's happening and being the bridges. Like, if there was ever a time we need, cross-border bridges right now, I feel like now's a really, really important time, right?
Yeah.
And in fields such as education, which, again, we're all supporting the sustainable development goals. We're all trying to unleash the potential of humanity. We're kind of a little bit stuck thinking about our own patch at the moment, but hopefully education and innovation specifically is a place we can all connect to share ideas and learn from each other.
So that's also that leads into one of the other areas that I know HolonIQ publishes a lot about, which is partnerships, OPMs. I'm curious for what you're seeing from a global perspective on those partnerships. Is it more between OPMs and helping bring more of the degrees online? Is it more on the boot camp and short course offerings coming online? What are you seeing between these global partnerships right now?
You are all over it, Abby.
I'm telling you, I'm a subscriber.
So it's an incredible story. It really is. And now that we've been able to quantify it as well, kind of the thing that I think one of the things we pride ourselves on is turning the storytelling into numbers to help kind of back it up with data. And what we've seen is this incredible growth of what we're calling, to kind of back out and get people to think more strategically, is academic public-private partnerships. You know, public-private partnerships, or PPPs or P3s, depends where you are in the world is what you call them. They're not new. They're old school. Like healthcare went through them in the last decade, infrastructure the decade before, education feels like it's heating up now. And the US led the charge. 10 or so years ago, as with a lot of fields, the US just has this amazing kind of ability to create new models and innovate. And the US kind of really led the charge in these, online program managers and public-private partnerships. And it did start off, Abby, with helping universities build and deliver online programs. In fact, it's an amazing backstory because it actually goes back to the cassette tape and distance learning, but that's for another session.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've got to hear that story.
But that it's booming. Last year alone, there were 300 public-private partnerships formed around the world. And what I think most people forget is it's universities who make that happen. Like, sure, there's an OPM who's standing there saying, we want to support you. I'd love my team to be able to drive you. But two people have to enter into a partnership. And this kind of goes all the way back to John's initial point around infrastructure is, if you're an institution, you're being told to move really fast. You don't have the same funding that you had before. And you've got a really big challenge ahead of you. And you're kind of faced with this buy, build, or partner decision set. And like, build is super slow. It's cool, but it's super slow. And you actually need to have the DNA internally to build too. Buy kind of works in these instances, sometimes not. Partners is a super neat option to move really fast, but also to learn from a partner. Like, think out of this context is like, hey, you guys are amazing at this stuff. Can you hang out with us for the next 10 years? And we'll watch and learn and we'll connect and we'll probably teach you some things too. And so we're seeing it. We think there'll be 400 partnerships this year. But the kind of fine print is internationals really taking off now. Like the US really led the charge, internationals. And then the double click as well is much of that growth now is being driven by boot camp partnerships.
Interesting.
And so again, you look around the governments around the world and they're all saying, hey, universities and colleges, can you do some kind of tech focused short form career linked programs, and could you start like yesterday, please? And so, some of them are very well resourced and can kind of forge that journey on their own. And others are like, we are super busy running this whole COVID thing and on top of business usual. Hey, partner, bootcamp that knows this stuff inside out, has been doing it for 10 years. Can we hang out and do this together? And we're seeing a lot of that, which is wonderful. And hopefully, regulators and the like who are perhaps concerned about the unintended consequences of public-private partnerships, hopefully they're seeing it for what it is, which is, institutions looking for somebody to team up with who knows this. And it's a long-term game. So it's exciting to see that develop. It's exciting to see, if you really zoom out, education make its way through the journey of public-private partnerships like its peers, healthcare and infrastructure did a long time ago.
Yeah, 400 partnerships, that's a dizzying amount. Encouraging. I actually want to ask this question because I've heard you talk about this in terms of one of these US trends you alluded to earlier when you mentioned we're still biasing to level of education when we go through applications. But I've heard you talk about the US obsession with higher ed and brand.
Oh, yeah.
And how do you feel like these partnerships, I'm hoping, maybe I'm not trying to lead you into an answer, but I'm hoping these partnerships are kind of like getting us past that, or maybe they're not. Maybe they're just enabling it in a different way. I don't know.
Yeah, look, I spend a lot of time when it's not COVID stateside. I spend a lot of time when it's not COVID everywhere else. And it is something that sticks out. It's like some of my, some of my own thinking when I'm stateside is like, these guys have got such incredible infrastructure, but there's also such massive kind of barriers because of the, affinity for the current model and for brand and other things. And you can see it changing for sure. But, Ivy League admissions stuff, like all the breadcrumbs we went through in the last 24 months, there's cracks that everyone wants to address. And so, look, I think that I think we will see change, and I think that, I know institutions who have already made the decision. They're in the departure lounge. They're like, we're doing this, like, strap in, we're going to go for it. We're going to be one of the leaders.
Which I guess in the US, it could go one of two ways in my head. It's like we can change and we can start to see less reliance on brand, or we can see those brands all of a sudden say, oh, I see my opportunity here. I'm going after 200,000, 400,000, 1 million students because I feel like I've got there's kind of two ways that could manifest itself.
Yeah, I think if I'm not a marketing professor by any means, but much of the utility of brand is in increased price. And you think about luxury goods and all these kind of analogies. And I think in education, what we want brand to be is a reliability marker, a threshold of quality and the like. And we don't, I think that's the kind of the fork in the road we're trying to walk back from, is like, can we not do this thing where we just increase the price of education year on year and year on year? Like, could we have the best of both worlds? And there's been a lot of commentary around, institutions who tout very, very low admissions rates. Like, why don't we say, hey guys, you're obviously oversubscribed. It's time to double your
oversubscribed.
Or triple your enrollments, right? You are doing an amazing job. That is a testament to it. Guess what? You just won the right to deliver 5 times the output that you are today and onboard and share the load a bit, with those.
So I'm going to wrap up with this last question, then I'll give it to Abby for any of her last ones and maybe to take us home, because as forecasted, this just took off on us and all of a sudden we're inching up to 45 minutes. But as it relates to this topic, one of the things that you mentioned, which is maybe a perception that, the bigger the online degree or experience isn't as good. And I think that does manifest itself, at least here in the US, in terms of maybe alumni, faculty having this belief that, like, hey, big online populations, maybe that does erode our brand, right? Although on the flip side of that, I saw President Crow at Arizona State, which most of us know they were one of the pioneers, certainly as one of the flagships in getting out there and building an online population. I think he said they took a 30-spot jump in the world rankings, right? So that actually their game plan, whether you give it full attribution in terms of their online efforts or not, seems to be enhancing the value, the perception of ASU. And I'm just wondering if actually these two things are getting to the point where they are going to start working symbiotically.
Yeah.
Online and on campus, and one actually benefiting the other, because I can make a very salient argument: the more robust of an online population have, the better opportunities you have to create an enhanced on-campus experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you touched on at the end there is, like, how are we measuring success? Like, if we're thinking, will online degrade my brand? I think we're way in the wrong headspace. Like, if we're thinking, if I really build out this digital capability, could I double the impact we're having as an institution? And yeah, sure, maybe there's some, rankings rubbish where I go up or down or whatever. But, if I'm being true to my mission, have I evidenced that I am substantially impacting the lives of 1.2x, the people that I'm saying, and in a better way. And you see that also with with on campus, where folks are saying, I think we can do this on campus thing better by incorporating some digital stuff.
Right.
You know, and it will be better. It's not because it's cheaper. It's not because it's faster. It's because it's better. You know, and then from the digital side, and so it's definitely, I think you picked on a really important point, John, is like it's our kind of the incumbency and the pressure of the incumbent system on us is kind of, how do you break out of that headspace to like, whoa, I'm thinking about this the wrong way. If I'm thinking, should we do digital because it might affect my, you know, the brand perception or whatever, like I've obviously lost track. But
I agree. But I guess per that example on ASU, it seems like maybe the incumbency of the system is actually changing to recognize what is going versus where it's been. Maybe that's
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, this actually leads into a question that we like to ask every single guest, and one that we typically end on. So it could be related to this or the other many topics we covered with EdTech, public-private partnerships. But who would you nominate for the head of the class? Someone who's doing some amazing work in the education space.
Yeah. I got a heads up, I'm not going to lie.
Yes.
And you know, we've talked a lot about higher ed. So here's one, and I didn't want to pick something in the US, right, to give us kind of a global.
Good.
So one of my favorite kind of teams at the moment, or for a while, a little bit, is called the London Interdisciplinary School. It's an alternative university. It's in London, surprise, surprise. It's the first institution since the 1960s to be awarded degree awarding powers in the UK. And they're bringing like a whole fresh approach to this and trying to wrap up a lot of what we've talked about curriculum, but they're trying to keep the special sauce that higher ed has got too. And that's captured in this interdisciplinary component. And so I think their first cohort is this year, like 100 students. COVID, you know, was a big speed bump for those guys because they were in takeoff mode and then got hit by COVID. But I would check those guys out for inspiration. But just those, you know, for degree awarding powers since 1960, that also reflects the government's going, let's back this.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Let's try this too. So that's my pick, Abby.
Okay, cool. I'm definitely gonna have to check them out. Thanks for sharing that, Patrick. Well, overall, thank you so much for your time, Patrick. It's always so much fun to trade insights and POVs and research with you. So I'm sure this is the first of many appearances on ManifestED. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. For more great content and interviews like this, please like and subscribe below. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks, Abby. Thanks, John.